Hello, I'm Yvette Cooper. I'm Labour's Minister for Housing. I want to respond to the questions that you've put to us on housing. The first question was from Christina King, and Christina King asked, what are your proposals to help first-time buyers get onto the housing ladder? Will those buying their homes under the old rules of right to buy be affected in any way? I think the right to buy is really important and needs to carry on. People have got to have the chance to be able to buy their home, but that of course only applies to people who are in council housing, and there's a lot of other first-time buyers who are just not able to get on the housing ladder at the moment because they can't afford that first step. So we want to see a lot more shared ownership, so you can afford to buy a share of a home even if you can't afford the full house price. There is a lot of help available, and so people should contact, there's something called a home buy agent. You can find the details on the internet if people want to find out, you know, what help's available in your area, because there are a lot of new shared ownership homes being built now. The second question was from Steve Mogridge, who asked, I'm in favour of social housing but feel strongly that the best of this should be given to those who would cherish it and understand their responsibility to keep themselves and their families in order. I think, you know, of course, people do have a responsibility to, to keep their homes properly and to make sure they're abiding by the tenancy agreements. And I think the vast majority of people who are in social housing do that and actually feel proud of the homes that they're living in. Of course, you occasionally get the examples of antisocial behaviour or problems that occur. We've given councils and housing associations new powers and support to try and deal with the antisocial behaviour, and I think a lot of that work's going on. And of course, we want to kind of keep working with councils to make sure that we do that. Alistair asked, I accept the need for new homes, but I'm concerned that your intention to reduce the local scrutiny of planning applications will only serve the interests of profit-motivated developers. How will you ensure that neighbours that are adversely affected by new developments under the new proposals are consulted? It's absolutely clear that people are affected by a planning application in their area. They've got to be consulted. You've got to have those sorts of safeguards in place in the planning system. And I think people need to think more about the quality of the kinds of proposals that are put forward as well. But what we also have to do is to make sure that councils are doing much more to identify new land that will be appropriate for housing, good sustainable sites. We've got to do far more because we've got to bring forward more homes. We badly need additional homes. And I think the planning system's been too slow, often because in lots of areas councils have not identified enough good sites for homes. But you can do that and still have good quality, proper scrutiny of the applications when they go through the planning process. You've got to be able to do both. Jennifer Hibbard asked, what are you going to do about empty homes, such as those which we have next door to us? It's a disgrace when there are so many people who cannot afford to buy their own home. I agree. I think you've got to have action to bring empty homes back into use, as well as to build more homes, given the pressures on housing that we face. Jennifer, it might be worth contacting your local council if the home has been empty for more than 6 months, because in those situations councils do have powers now. We introduced them in recent housing legislation, and they do have powers to take much stronger action if you've got a landlord that's just leaving something empty or not doing the repairs or not bringing it back into use, so that somebody could rent it out or somebody could buy it themselves. So contact your local council. There are a series of much tougher powers that they can use now, and they should be using them. Joan Blackley asked, why is building on greenfield sites allowed when there are many brownfield sites available? We've actually seen, I think, over the last 10 years, a big reduction in the proportion of homes being built on greenfield sites, quite as a result of the changes that we made to planning rules to put much greater priority onto brownfield land. So the proportion of new homes being built on brownfield land has gone up from 57% in 1997 up to around 74% today. So that has been a big increase. But we need to bring more brownfield land back into use, whether that's old coalfield sites, old employment land, or disused public sector sites. And we're particularly working with other government departments like the MOD and Transport Department on bringing public sector land, disused public sector sites, into use for housing. But ultimately it's for local councils to decide in their area where are the most sustainable sites and what should the priority be in those areas, giving the broad priority for brownfield but also giving them flexibility to decide quite what the best and most sustainable locations are in each area. Kenny Elport asked finally, how will you ensure that building low-cost housing will not have a knock-on effect and devalue properties already built? If the new buyers are not buying existing houses, this is bound to bring the prices down, which may be good news for people not on the housing market, but not good for people who've already made the investment in their property, or even worse, end up with negative equity. I think to distinguish, there's obviously housing markets are always affected by short-term issues, things like interest rates or consumer confidence or attitudes in the market and so on. Over the long term, though, what we've seen is this country has just not been building enough homes for a generation. So over the last 30 years of the 20th century, we had a 30% increase in the number of households, but we had a 50% drop in the level of house building, and I just think that's completely unsustainable. And that's why we've seen over the last 20 years the level of house prices has actually trebled in 20 years. So it's little wonder that first-time buyers are facing pressures. We've got an ageing, growing population into the future, and that means we need to build more homes. So I don't think this is something that is to the detriment of people who are already homeowners. I think quite the reverse. This is about supporting everybody in the community into the future and making sure that we've got enough homes being built to meet needs of the future. Otherwise, in the end, it's just not fair on first-time buyers. It's just not fair on people who are on council waiting lists. And, we'll get to a point otherwise if your chances of buying your own home will depend on whether or not your parents or grandparents can lend you the money to get started, and that's not fair on those who haven't got that kind of help to get that first foot on the ladder. So that's why I think it is right, the long term, that we do support plans for 3 million more homes by 2020. Of course, that means there's got to be a lot of partnership working, in every local area to make it happen. But I just think for the future and for our children growing up, it's the right thing to do. Thanks very much. I hope that helps answer some of your questions.